I might. What?
Please.
Oh.
Lovely. And so much fun.
Okay. I will. I'm gonna drink just for you, man. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Give us some love. Hi, my name is Pritsker. This is Dan Cooper. We run the. Oh yeah, you can applaud the whole time. You can just keep applauding. We run the organization Concordance. We are in our 41st season. Season 41. Yeah, that's a good one. And we produce about 50 concerts a year. 50.
Is that one concert per month?
That's almost more than one concert. We don't even do the whole year. It's from August to June, so we skip a month or so.
We're not so good at math.
We're not so good. But we do a lot of concerts, and welcome to our event. And each concert is very eclectic music. It just has to be new, it has to be written today, but it could be for anything. Today happens to be a big band. Dan, say something.
Well, this is the second concert of our Motion Festival. We just had a wonderful event down at St. Mark's Church featuring martial arts and jugglers and dancers. And tonight we've got the Lindy Hop and the motion associated with the great sound of the big bands. This is our LittleBig band, of course. On the back of your program, it says next concert, but it's a lie, actually.
It's a lie, it's wrong.
The actual next concert is on Sunday, this weekend, down at Drome. And so we'd love to see you there at the marathon at Drome on Sunday. And then on Friday, we've got an electronic music concert up at Silvana's. It's a free event. We'd love to see you there. This is part of our annual festival. We also want to call attention to some of our associate directors who are here with us. There's Milica Paranosic over here. And Seth Boustead is there. There he is, Seth. Thank you so much. Folks, a lot of the composers, of course, in the band are going to share with us their process and ideas that went into this music. He hates the word process. You hate that word, process, right? Process good? We want to thank all the composers and musicians for all the time and talent they devoted to this program. And we're so grateful to Adam McGreen for hosting us here at Loft 393. What a beautiful venue, right? I tell people, it's right on Canal Broadway, I can't believe it. So we have so many concerts that we actually forgot a concert this Sunday. That's really funny. That's really proves the point. I'm sorry. I wasn't gonna drink, but this lady said that I thought that was your baton.
She said I should drink for this concert, so I started drinking. I don't know why. It was a request. This is for a request. You really drink, obviously. So today, big band music is known for dancing, and we're focusing on the Lindy Hop. And the Lindy Hop, for those of you, I think it was named after Charles Lindbergh, right? Which is kind of weird.
You're airborne. You're flying through the air like Charles Lindbergh.
But it was itself an eclectic dance where they were combining like jive dancing and they were combining all these what is it called? All these different types of dancing, and they call it Lindy Hop. So we will have today some real dancers who are in that tradition. So that will be part of it, and that's and the big band, we call this the LittleBig band because the full big band is bigger, and this one is smaller. It's littler. Okay. And, so let's, John, you're telling me I gotta move on because you got another thing?
Explain that.
I'm trying to explain. I'm having a hard time. Huh?
Well, there was the great movie back in the day. Remember LittleBig Man with Dustin Hoffman?
Oh, there was an actually...
Yeah, he's among the Native Americans and so forth. And so we thought, well, it's not a full-size big band, so we'll call it the LittleBig Band. There you go.
So we're gonna just start this sucker off. Okay, our first piece is by a composer he's alive, he's just not here. So he can't talk to us. His name is Joseph Waters. Joseph might be watching on the live stream in his house in his underwear on the couch. Hi, Joseph. Maybe. He's in San Diego, right? He has a rehearsal. That's a good image. You like that image? So he wrote us a very fast piece. So don't try to dance to this. You're going to break your leg. But it's called Storming on the Mississippi. So we're going to hit it right. We're going to hit this. Joseph Warren's Mississippi. What is it? Something in Mississippi. Skipping, dancing, storming. Storming in Mississippi. Mississippi. Cool. Our next piece, thank you, Joseph. If you heard that in your house, in your underwear. We have a piece by our tenor sax player, Scott Hoefling, and it's called Grimy Lindy. Can you tell us something about this, Scott?
I was listening to a lot of hip hop music, and yeah, I was just inspired to try to kind of capture that a little bit with this piece of music. The band is so great, and you know, these musicians are incredible, and they keep coming back. You know, you see the same faces and then some new ones, and I think, you know, I just wanted to take a moment to thank Gene and Dan, because you know, they do a great job of giving everyone else credit, but we often don't give them credit. And yeah, I think we did great. So thank you. I hope you enjoy this piece. We're going to try it.
We're gonna try. We're gonna succeed even. What? All right, so when I thought of the word Lindy Hop, I of course heard the word hop, and so I wrote a piece called Lindy Hip Hop. And for the Lindy Hip Hop piece that I wrote, I said I'm gonna need some swing dancers, and luckily my niece is a competition winner with her partner Lucas. So here's Sophie and Lucas coming out, guys, and they dance the job. And then I said, well, I got the swing dancers, and they're very good. You're gonna see what they do. So I also need a hip hop dancer. So I emailed with some friends that I was looking around, and I found Jayla. And Jayla's here, and she's gonna come out. So she's the hip hop portion. And yeah, so we got the swing, we got the hip hop. What could possibly go wrong? I mean wrong. It's the person that ever went wrong. They're gonna be back for another song, the last song. We're gonna do some more of those. Whew. Man, I'm tired. Wait, who's this? This guy's not here either to talk shit. Alright, so alright, so in our next composer, I'm gonna bring it down a little. We're gonna do a ballad for the ladies. Our next composer is Bass Soldier, who we love. He's a great composer, violinist. He's in Portugal right now, on his couch in his underwear, probably. Hi, David, everybody who's watching you. He wrote a piece called, let me mispronounce this, Amancer. Wrong? Wrong. Wait, I really forget. Amancer. What is it? It's the sunrise. Oh, good. I'm a little sweaty. I don't want no sunrise. Okay, I'm on set. We're gonna try this. Thank you, David.
No, that's Spanish.
I know, but he's in Portugal. That's the wrong piece to play. I'm very confused.
That's the translation to Portuguese. Since it's in Portugal, o amanhecer.
Okay. A lot of counting here. No one's wrong. Here we go. David Soldier, thank you. From Portugal, Spanish, peace. I can't pronounce. That featured Todd on notes that don't exist in the saxophone, but he knows how to play them. I don't know. He thought he was a violin for this one. Seth Boustead is here, and he's alive. Yeah, he's alive. Yeah. Seth, he wrote us a piece called Circular Logic. Let's see what this has to do with Lindy Hop.
For years, whatever the theme is, I don't stick to it, you know? And this time around, I was thinking, what's the opposite of the Lindy Hop?
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but it's possible that the Austrian composer Gustav Mahler is the opposite of the Lindy Hop. I don't know, it's entirely possible. If you don't know this composer, he writes big pieces. And John Clark is a wonderful horn player, he's in the band, so I thought, oh, I'm gonna steal, I didn't steal it actually, I just kind of wrote something very reminiscent of the horn solo that opens Mahler's Third Symphony. So it's not exact, I kind of just, changed it up a little bit, and then that becomes the basis of the piece, the rest of it's entirely in my language. And I was trying to come up with some kind of like clever riff on a Mahler title, but his titles are either really boring, like Symphony No. 3, or it's like songs about the death of children, which is objectively a bummer. So I know that the form of the piece is kind of circular. I'll call it Circular Logic. I hope you enjoy it.
All right. Now we know that melody. John's been playing this melody, and he's like, what is it, Brooklyn Mahler? Can you say it? Now he's nervous. Now he's gonna play Mahler. Good. 1, 2, 1, 2. for Logic. Yeah, man. That Logic was circular. Dan Cooper, did you write a piece for this? What is it called?
It's got a doozy of a title, that's for sure. That's true, I won't call it doozy, it's true. Folks, you having a good time? Yeah. Where are we, Cincinnati? Is this a New York audience or what? You having a good time? Woo! Let's get up this band. So, this time of year, a lot of us musicians who are also educators, we're wrapping up the semester, grading a lot of exams, have a mountain of term papers to grade, all that kind of thing. This next piece, the title came from the process of grading some exams, a survey course at FIT, and I played Aaron Copland's The Fanfare for the Common Man for the students, so audio identification, write the title. And one of the students wrote, Welfare for the Common Man. What would you do? What would you do? Full credit? Partial credit? What do you think? Full credit? Partial credit? Scott? Yeah, full credit, I think so. So then I got to thinking about other things that would rhyme with welfare for the with fanfare for the common man, and I thought of cab fare for the ramen fan. And I figured this would work really well with the Motion Festival, taxi cab and motion. And then I took a taxi down here this afternoon. I got on FDR Drive and we were just stuck there. So maybe it was more about stasis than motion. I don't know. Maybe next year's festival will be stasis. Anyway, so hope you enjoy. This is I sent it to Aaron Copeland, cab fare for the ramen fan.
Use the Franz boo-boo, you clutch it. Good. Why does that start off? The drums. Kevin, on the trumpet. What? Here we go. 1, 2. Sax solo by Todd and Scott. Drum solo Kevin. Alon had a little solo. And speaking of Alon, Alon doesn't want to speak. Do you want to say something? Say something. Come on, man. Say something in Hebrew. Hebrew would be funny.
Thanks for coming, guys. This piece is called High Quality Dreams, and it's about high quality dreams.
That was the best spoken I've ever heard, actually. Very good. Actually, that explains a lot to me. So, this piece has a lot of, they don't breathe so much, so it's a lot of breathing work, which happens like in sleep. You don't breathe so well. Alon Nechushtan. What? High quality drink. Those not like the low quality drink we had earlier. Those are high quality. We got Millie. Millie Paranosic is here in the house. She wrote a piece about hard to beat hologram. How does this have to do with Lindy Hop?
It has to do with contrast and mistakes. And if you think about like little and big, it's a contrast. And then hologram heartbeat is just a fancy way of saying a heartbeat arrhythmia or like a problem or a health issue. But you know how sometimes we do that to ourselves intentionally, like we have a little bit too much to drink or something else or whatever, we overwork ourselves or. But, and then we think it's fun, actually, because things are a little bit not normal. And so this is an invitation to look at the problems that you have in your life as a fun play on elements that got a little bit out of phase. And in musical language, this reflects in this piece as these kind of like broken melodies that get transferred from one place to another, and you can't quite follow them, but they appear, but then they disappear, and just an invitation to make fun of what actually hurts sometimes. And that's all I have to say about that. Am I right? Wonderful venue. Thank you so much. Beautiful players. Thank you to everyone who contributed to making this be as wonderful as it is. Take it away.
That was some deep shit, man.
I know.
I need an editor for that. Oh wait, I said the loud part of the soft part. This is also Paranosic. Thank you, Millie. Beautiful. Millie. Oh, man. Our second recipe is by John Clark. John plays the French horn. He says it's not French, so we just call it the horn. And it's called Foamy Lid. Tell us about it.
I have just two things to tell you about Foamy Lid, and they're both really important. The first one is, no animals were harmed in the composition of this piece. It's a historical fact.
I mean, I killed things all the time.
Historical fact. The other thing is that called anagram maker, and if you put Foamy Lid into the anagram maker, it will come up with hundreds of different anagrams, and one of them is Lindy Hop.
I mean the other way around. We put Lindy Hop and Milica. Okay, you don't understand. Both ways. So you see composers who didn't do the theme, this is what you do, Seth. I just like to pick on Seth. All right, Foamy Lid. One, two, look at my shoe. the trumpet. Take a solo on this one. There he is. Yeah. JC in the house. All right. So, our big finale. We're going to invite back on stage Lucas and Sophie and Jayla, or whatever you want for a kiss. So, is a song by, well, it was written by Jerry Leiber and Mike Stoller, but you guys know him from Elvis Presley, and it's called Jailhouse Rock. So I transcribed it and arranged it, but then I wanted to change it up, so I call it Jailhouse Cha-Cha. Because I think that's what they want to do in a jailhouse. They want to cha-cha-cha. But it's a very fast cha-cha-cha because they're in jail. They want to get out. I don't know. I'm making shit up. All right, so this is Jailhouse Cha-Cha featuring our Solid Gold dancers. Solid Gold. You remember the Solid Gold? One for nothing and then the first one, right? I'd like to introduce the band, if I can. On the piano, saxophone, Scott Hoefling. On the alto saxophone, Todd, Rewoldt. On the baritone saxophone, Raina. On the horn of the French, or just the horn, John Clark. On the bass trombone, Sheena. On the trumpet, Alex. On the trumpet, Franz. On the trumpet, Jayla Bediako. On the piano, Alon Nechushtan. On the bass, Ruzza. And on the drums, Lee Jeffryes. My name is Pritsker. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for all the bowlers. Thank you for the LittleBig band CompCord. Let's do group out. We're going to get up for 1 second. 1, 2, 3. Thank you for coming out. Let's have some drinks in the back. Thank you, Adam, for having us in Loft 393. Oh, we're still taking pictures? This is the picture. We're here. Everybody look at Alex. You have to come to you again later, so just take a picture. Take what you can. Take what you can. Alex. Thank you, everybody. Peace. We put it together. We did it tonight. Oh no.